The cubs had constructed a functional government underneath sleeping furniture, which should have been physically impossible given their paw structure. Let me back up because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Vexthor has finally cracked under the pressure of managing 63 predator cubs on a deep space station. You're thinking maybe I inhaled too much disinfectant while cleaning the feeding area. But I promise you, colleagues, I was completely sober when I discovered that the cubs in Dormitory Section C had excavated a complex network of chambers beneath the humans' sleeping platform, complete with what I can only describe as parliamentary seating arrangements. I run the largest multi-species childcare facility in this sector. 8 cycles I've been doing this job. I've handled cubs from 40 different species, including 3 that were actively venomous and 1 that could phase through solid matter when frightened. I thought I'd seen everything. Then Station Command assigned me a human. Her name was Petra. She arrived on the morning supply transport wearing clothing covered in images of small earth canines and carrying a bag that jingled when she walked. The assignment sheet said she was qualified in animal behavior specialization, which I assumed was some kind of xenobiology degree. I learned later it meant she'd spent 15 years teaching Earth creatures called dogs to perform tricks for food rewards. This is apparently considered a legitimate profession on Earth. I met her in my office to discuss station protocols. Standard procedure, I'd done it hundreds of times. I pulled up the holographic display showing our current population breakdown. We have 63 cubs currently in residence, I explained. 42 are Krevnath predator stock, standard quadrupedal development. The remaining 21 are scattered across 6 other species. The Krevnath young are our primary concern. They're highly intelligent, physically capable, and naturally hierarchical. We maintain strict socialization protocols to prevent pack violence. Petra nodded, making notes on an actual paper pad. With a writing implement. I hadn't seen anyone use physical paper since my academy days. What's their age range? She asked. 3 to 6 standard cycles, developmentally equivalent to pre-adolescent in most species. They're past the helpless stage but not yet cognitively mature. So like 8 to 12 in dog years, got it. I did not, in fact, got it, but I continued with the orientation. Your duties will include supervised play sessions, meal coordination, basic education assistance, and emergency intervention if aggressive behaviors escalate. The cubs are generally well socialized, but they're still apex predators. Bite strength sufficient to sever appendages, claw work that can shred standard station materials, and pack hunting instincts that activate under stress. Petra looked up from her paper. Do they respond to vocal commands? They're sentient beings, not domesticated animals. They respond to rational discussion and established authority structures. She made another note. I noticed she'd drawn a small canine figure in the margin. Right, but if something's happening fast, do they understand tone and body language? Of course. They're highly perceptive. It's part of their predator evolution. Perfect. She smiled like I'd just confirmed something important. Can I meet them? I should have recognized that smile as a warning sign. The cubs were in the main play area when we arrived. They were engaged in what appeared to be normal activities. Rax, the largest male, was demonstrating pouncing techniques to a group of younger cubs. Scylla and her cohort were practicing their stealth approaches using the climbing structures. Korth was gnawing on a reinforced chew toy in the corner. Standard, healthy predator development. Petra walked to the center of the room and did something I'd never seen any caregiver do in 8 cycles. She whistled. Not a communication device. Not a translation matrix alert. An actual whistle produced by forcing air through her mouth in a specific way that created a sharp, penetrating sound. Every single cub stopped what they were doing and looked at her. "Sit," she said. I was about to explain that the translation matrix would render that command meaningless, that cubs required complex verbal instruction to understand expectations, that you couldn't just bark orders at sentient beings like they were mindless creatures. Rax sat, his haunches folded under him, his tail curled around his body, and he looked directly at Petra with complete attention. Then Scylla sat, then Korth, then every other cub in the room, 42 predators arranging themselves in a semicircle around this human who'd been on the station for exactly 12 minutes. "Good," Petra said. She reached into her jingling bag and threw something small through the air. Rax caught it in his mouth. He began chewing with an expression I can only describe as blissful. "What did you just give him?" I demanded. "Treat. Dehydrated meat product, protein dense, size appropriate for his jaw structure. I brought 3 kilos of them." She threw more to the other cubs. They caught them with precision that suggested they'd been training for this moment their entire lives. You can't just feed them random substances. There are dietary protocols, nutritional requirements, allergy matrices. Already cleared it with medical. Sent the ingredient list before I shipped out. She made a clicking sound with her tongue. Release. The cubs exploded back into activity, but something was different. They kept glancing back at Petra. They'd established her as something important in their social structure, something I'd never managed to achieve despite years of experience and multiple advanced degrees. "How did you do that?" I asked. "Basic pack dynamics. They're hierarchical, right? So you establish yourself as higher in the hierarchy. Clear commands, immediate rewards, consistent follow-through. It's the same method I used for teaching German Shepherds. These are not German Shepherds. No, but they're pack predators with similar social structures and reward-motivated learning patterns. The specifics don't matter as much as the underlying psychology." She was watching Rax, who was now watching her. "He's the alpha, isn't he? Or trying to be. We don't use dominance terminology. It's considered reductive. But he's the leader. He exhibits leadership behaviors, yes. So he's the alpha." She pulled out her paper pad again. "That's actually perfect. If I work with him, the others will follow his example. Pack structure flows from the top." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't because she was right. The cubs did follow Rax's lead. We just never described it in such primitive terms. Over the next 3 days, I watched Petra do impossible things. She taught the cubs to line up for meals without shoving. She taught them to respond to hand signals from across the room. She taught them a recall command that brought them running from wherever they'd wandered. She did it all with whistles, clicks, treats, and a completely unfounded confidence that these methods would work. And they did work. The cubs were calmer, more focused, more cooperative. Aggressive incidents dropped by 60%. The other caregivers started asking Petra for advice. I should have been pleased. Instead, I was deeply unsettled because I was watching a human apply animal training techniques to sentient beings, and the sentient beings were responding like it was exactly what they'd been waiting for. On the 4th day, I was doing evening rounds through the dormitory sections. Each section housed 12 to 15 cubs, with sleeping platforms arranged around a central common area. I'd done these rounds thousands of times. Visual confirmation, environmental check, security sweep, routine. I was passing through Section C when I heard something odd. Voices, multiple cubs, speaking in low tones, coming from underneath Petra's sleeping platform. The human had requested quarters in the dormitory section instead of staff housing. She claimed it would help her maintain pack presence overnight. I'd approved it because her daytime results were undeniable, and because I was curious about human sleeping requirements. Now I was regretting that curiosity. I activated my wrist light and bent down to look under the platform. Standard clearance, maybe 40 centimeters of space between the platform base and the floor. Enough room for cleaning drones, but nothing else. Except there was something else. There was a hole. A carefully excavated tunnel leading down through the floor plating. And from that tunnel came the sound of cubs having what sounded distinctly like a meeting. I triggered my communicator. Krival, I need security to dormitory section C immediately. What's the situation? Krival's voice crackled back, professional and calm. The cubs have excavated unauthorized tunnels under the humans' quarters. A pause. How far? I don't know. I need structural sensors and possibly excavation equipment. Krival arrived within minutes, carrying a portable scanner. She was Krevnath herself, which made her simultaneously the most and least appropriate person for this situation. Most appropriate because she understood predator-cub psychology. Least appropriate because she tended to be very defensive about her species' young. She ran the scanner over the floor. Her cranial ridge flushed dark blue, which I'd learned meant either anger or confusion. There's a chamber down there, she said slowly. Actually, multiple chambers, connected by tunnels. It extends under most of this section. How long has this been going on? I have no idea. We inspect the dormitories daily, but we don't typically scan through the floor plating. The plating is reinforced titanium alloy. They shouldn't be able to scratch it, much less excavate through it. And yet, we stood there, listening to the murmur of cub voices from beneath our feet. Should we go down? I asked. Krival shook her head. Tunnel diameter is too small for adult mass. We'd need to remove floor sections. Then we need to call the cubs out. Before I could issue the command, Petra emerged from the communal washing facility, her hair wet and a towel around her shoulders. She saw us standing near her sleeping platform and smiled. Oh, good. You found it. You knew about this? I tried to keep my voice level. Of course. They've been working on it since my second night here. Classic denning behavior. Pack animals like enclosed spaces for social bonding. I figured as long as they weren't compromising structural integrity, it was healthy development. Krival's cranial ridge went from dark blue to almost black. They excavated through military-grade flooring and you thought it was healthy. Well, they used proper engineering techniques. See how they've reinforced the tunnel entrance? And they're clearly maintaining ventilation. Otherwise, we'd smell the air quality issues. It's actually pretty impressive problem-solving for their developmental stage. They're children, I said. Living under the floor, having secret meetings. They're establishing pack hierarchy outside adult supervision. It's normal. Dogs do it too, just usually in basements instead of literal underground chambers. She knelt and made a clicking sound. Rax, can you come up here, please? There was a pause, then scraping sounds. Then Rax's head emerged from the tunnel, followed by his shoulders, followed by the rest of him. He sat in front of Petra without being told. She gave him a treat. Good boy. Who else is down there? Rax made a soft, chuffing sound. One by one, more cubs emerged. Scylla, Korth, 5 others I recognized. They arranged themselves in a neat line. "Is everyone out?" Petra asked. Rax chuffed again. "Okay, release." The cubs dispersed to their sleeping platforms, like nothing unusual had happened, like we hadn't just discovered they'd been operating an underground complex. I looked at Krival. Krival looked at me. Neither of us knew what to say. Petra yawned. "It's late. We can do a full structural assessment tomorrow if you want. But honestly, I think they're just working through some pack dynamics. Give them another few days, and they'll probably abandon it for something else. Cubs get bored easily." She climbed onto her sleeping platform. Within minutes, I heard the distinctive sound of human snoring. Under the platform, I heard something else. Quiet, scratching sounds. The cubs were going back down. "We need to investigate that chamber," Krival said. "Tomorrow, when we can get proper equipment and lighting." I started toward the exit, then stopped. "And maybe bring a xenoarchaeologist." "Why?" "Because I have a feeling we're not just dealing with tunnels." I was right. When we returned the next morning with scanning equipment, medical staff, and structural engineers, we discovered that the cubs hadn't just dug holes in the ground. They'd built something. The main chamber was roughly 4 meters in diameter. The walls were smooth, reinforced with what appeared to be station material scavenged from disposal units. There were 8 smaller chambers branching off, each one clearly designated for a specific purpose. One held food stores, one held water, one held sleeping materials, and one held documents, not data files, not digital records, physical documents, carved into sheets of compressed station material with cub claws. I recognized the writing system. It was a simplified version of standard galactic script, but phonetically consistent and grammatically sound. The documents were labeled meeting minutes, attendance records, voting tallies, proposed rules for underground complex usage. "They built a government," the structural engineer whispered. "Don't be ridiculous," I said. But I was reading the documents, and she was right. The cubs had established a legislative system. They had representatives, voting procedures, conflict resolution protocols. It was crude but functional. More than functional, it was sophisticated. Rax appeared at my elbow, making me jump. He'd somehow descended while I was reading. He looked at the documents in my hands, then looked at me. "Did you write these?" I asked. He chuffed affirmatively. "Why?" He cocked his head, like the question was absurd. Petra's voice came from above, from the dormitory floor. "Rax, are you giving Vexthor the tour? Bring him to the main chamber." Main chamber. Like this was official. Rax led me deeper into the complex. The passages were tight, but navigable. The air quality was good. Everything was remarkably well maintained. The main chamber was the largest space. The walls were carved with more writing. Lists of names, marked with symbols I didn't recognize. In the center was a raised platform, clearly designated as a speaking area. And seated around that platform, in a perfect semicircle, were 38 cubs. They were waiting for me. Rax took his position at the center platform. He made a series of chuffing sounds, gestures with his paws, and what I can only describe as parliamentary motions. The other cubs responded with their own sounds, a clear pattern of call and response. One of the smaller cubs approached me. She was carrying something flat and rectangular. She placed it in my hands, then scurried back to her position. It was an invitation, carved in the same style as the other documents. My name at the top, spelled phonetically but accurately. Below that, a request for my attendance at a formal session. Tomorrow, sunset cycle. The cubs were inviting me to their government meeting. Rax chuffed. The other cubs echoed him. It sounded like applause. I climbed back up to the dormitory, my mind spinning. Krival was waiting with the rest of the investigation team. "What's down there?" she asked. I held up the invitation. "We need to contact Station Command." "Why?" "Because the cubs want to negotiate." Dr. Mothrin arrived within the hour, carrying enough scanning equipment to examine a small spacecraft. They were the station's leading xenopediatric specialist, which meant they'd spent 30 years studying developmental psychology across 40 species and had very strong opinions about proper childcare protocols. "Show me these documents," they said, not bothering with greetings. I handed over the carved invitation. Mothrin examined it with their scanner, then with their actual eyes, then with the scanner again. The linguistic structure is flawless. The grammar is consistent. The formal phrasing matches diplomatic protocols from at least 3 different cultural frameworks. They looked at me. "How long have they been receiving advanced education?" "They haven't. Standard curriculum only. Basic mathematics, simple science, social cooperation exercises." "Then this is impossible." And yet, Mothrin insisted on examining the cubs immediately. We brought Rax, Scylla, and Korth to the medical bay. Petra came too, carrying her treat bag. The cognitive assessment took 2 hours. Mothrin ran every test in their repertoire: pattern recognition, problem-solving, abstract reasoning, social intelligence. The cubs cooperated perfectly, mostly because Petra gave them treats every time they completed a task. "Stop doing that," Mothrin finally snapped. "You're contaminating the reward-response data." "They work better with positive reinforcement," Petra said. "They're not working, they're being evaluated." "Same thing to them." Mothrin pulled up the results on their display. Their skin pigmentation shifted through 6 different colors, which I'd learned meant they were experiencing profound confusion. Their cognitive development has accelerated by 300%. They're operating at near-adult capacity in multiple domains. This is medically impossible without genetic modification or neural enhancement. "They've been training," Petra said, like this explained everything. "Training doesn't alter fundamental brain development." "Sure it does. Neuroplasticity, learned behaviors, environmental enrichment. You give any intelligent creature structured challenges and social engagement, they develop faster. It's basic developmental psychology." Mothrin stared at her. "You're describing methods used for non-sentient animal enrichment. I'm describing methods that work on pack predators regardless of sentience level." Petra gave Rax another treat. "Good job with the spatial reasoning test, buddy." Rax chuffed happily. I left them arguing and went back to the dormitory section. Krival had brought in structural teams to assess the underground complex. They were trying to map the full extent of the excavation. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad isn't the right word." Krival pulled up a 3-dimensional schematic. They've created a network of chambers spanning 40 meters. They've tapped into the environmental systems for ventilation. They've rerouted water from the recycling pipes. They've even installed lighting using salvaged equipment from the maintenance depot. That's all restricted access. How did they get the materials? We're checking security footage. It appears they've been conducting nighttime expeditions for the past 20 days. She zoomed in on one section of the map. This chamber here concerns me most. Why? Because it contains what appears to be a library. I went down again. This time I brought proper lighting and a recording device. The chamber Krival had indicated was in the deepest section, farthest from the main entrance. The walls were lined with shelves, and the shelves were filled with documents. Hundreds of documents. I pulled one at random. It was a detailed description of station recycling protocols, written in Cub claw script. Another document contained meal schedules for the past month. Another held behavioral observations of adult crew members, including myself. They'd been studying us. Scylla appeared beside me. I was getting used to Cubs materializing from nowhere. "You're documenting everything," I said. She chuffed affirmatively. "Why?" She picked up a specific document and held it out to me. The title read, "Human Behavioral Patterns and Their Application to Pack Management." I read it. The Cubs had been observing Petra. They'd documented her training methods, her communication patterns, her reward systems. They'd analyzed why her techniques worked, and then they'd applied those techniques to their own social organization. They'd reverse-engineered pack dynamics and built a government from it. "This is incredible," I whispered. Scylla chuffed again. She led me to another section. The walls here were covered in what looked like legislative documents. Proposed rules for the ESO underground complex, voting procedures, conflict resolution systems. All of it based on the hierarchical structure Petra had established, but adapted for Cub society. At the bottom of one document, there was a formal request. Written in careful script, signed by all 38 Cubs currently living in Section C. They were petitioning for official station recognition of their underground complex as a legitimate civic organization. I climbed back up with the petition in my hands. Mothrin and Petra were still in the medical bay, still arguing about developmental psychology. Krival was coordinating with the structural teams. I triggered my communicator. "This is Vexthor. I need an emergency meeting with Station Command." "What's the situation?" the communications officer asked. "The Cubs are requesting citizenship rights." Silence. Then, "Please repeat that." "The Cubs have formed a government. They've written a constitution. They're asking for formal recognition under station law." More silence. Finally, "Ambassador Tolvex is being notified. Stand by." I stood there in the dormitory, holding a document carved by predator Cubs, listening to them conduct legislative business under the floor. Petra walked up beside me. "This is good, right? They're developing organizational skills, civic responsibility, democratic participation. That's advanced socialization. They're children living in an illegal underground complex, running an unsanctioned government." "Sure, but they're doing it really well." Ambassador Tolvex arrived the next morning. He was Krevnath, older generation, traditional diplomatic background. He'd negotiated treaties with hostile species, prevented 3 wars, and established trade agreements across 12 sectors. He was not prepared for the Cubs. I took him down into the complex. The Cubs had prepared for his visit. The main chamber was arranged formally. Rax stood at the central platform, with Scylla and Korth flanking him. The other Cubs sat in precise rows. Tolvex examined the space, read the documents on the walls, observed the organizational structure. His cranial ridge shifted through every color in the spectrum. "How long has this been operational?" he asked. 26 days, we think." "And you knew nothing about it?" "Not until 4 days ago." He turned to Rax. "You're the primary organizer?" Rax chuffed affirmatively. "Who taught you governmental structure?" Rax gestured upward, toward where Petra was presumably doing morning training exercises. "The human?" Another affirmative chuff. "Did she instruct you to build this?" Negative chuff. Rax made a complex series of gestures. Scylla stepped forward and handed Tolvex a document. It was a detailed explanation of their organizational philosophy, written in surprisingly sophisticated language. The core concept was simple. Petra had taught them pack hierarchy. They'd applied it to self-governance. Tolvex read in silence. When he finished, he looked at me. This is legally sound. What? Their petition, their structure, their documentation. Under galactic civic law, specifically the Sentient Youth Development Accords of Cycle 2891, they have legitimate grounds for organizational recognition. He looked back at Rax. Did you research the legal framework? Rax chuffed affirmatively and gestured to the library chamber. They've been studying station law, I said weakly. Apparently better than most adults. Tolvex examined the Constitution carved into the main chamber wall. This is going to require official review. Station Command will need to convene a formal hearing. A hearing? For Cubs? A hearing for citizens, because that's what they're claiming to be. The Cubs chuffed in unison. It sounded like victory. Station Command convened the hearing in the main conference chamber. I'd never seen so many senior officials in one place. Legal experts, civic administrators, xenopsychologists, and diplomatic corps representatives filled every available seat. At the center table sat 3 Cubs, Rax, Scylla, and Korth. Petra sat behind them in what she called a support position. She had her treat bag, which several officials had already objected to. She'd ignored them. Commander Veltash opened the proceedings. She was Threen, which meant she had 6 eyes and could literally watch everything simultaneously. Very useful for managing chaos. We are here to review the petition submitted by the juvenile residents of Dormitory Section C. This is unprecedented in station history. She looked directly at the Cubs. Do you understand why you're here? Rax stood on his hind legs, which I'd never seen him do before. It brought him almost to human height. He chuffed 3 times. The translation matrix struggled for a moment, then produced. We understand. We request recognition as organized civic entity under station law. Your children, Veltash said flatly. Children don't form governments. Scylla stood next. We are sentient beings engaged in cooperative social organization. Station law does not specify age requirements for civic assembly. The legal experts started frantically checking their databases. One of them, a Voreen named Kristinal, looked up with what I can only describe as horror. She's correct. The civic assembly protocols contain no age restrictions. Veltash's primary eyes narrowed. The protocols assume adult participants. Assumption is not legal specification, Korth added, standing beside his companions. I watched senior officials realize they were being out-argued by Cubs who should have been playing with chew toys. Let's approach this differently, said Mothrin, who'd been invited as an expert witness. Your cognitive assessments show accelerated development, but you're still pre-adolescent. You lack the emotional regulation and judgment capacity required for self-governance. Rax pulled a document from the satchel Scylla was carrying. Yes, they'd brought documentation. He placed it on the UA table. Incident reports for Section C dormitory. Past 30 days. 0 violent confrontations. 0 property damage. 0 behavioral interventions required. Compared to 30 days prior, 18 violent incidents, 43 property damage reports, 91 behavioral interventions. Mothrin examined the data. Their skin went pale. This is accurate. We implemented conflict resolution protocols based on pack hierarchy structure, clear authority chain, immediate consequence system, positive reinforcement for cooperative behavior. Rax gestured toward Petra. Human training methodology applied to social governance. You're describing dog training, someone said from the back. We are describing effective behavioral management applicable across species, Scylla corrected. The human demonstrated that hierarchical pack structures reduce conflict and increase cooperation. We adapted the model. Petra raised her hand. To be fair, I was just trying to keep them from biting each other. And you succeeded by implementing a governmental framework, Tolovec said, whether you recognized it as such or not. I recognized it as pack dynamics, which is basically government for dogs. So yeah, I guess. The room descended into chaos. Half the officials were arguing about legal precedent. The other half were arguing about whether comparing sentient beings to Earth canines was offensive. The cubs sat calmly through all of it, occasionally accepting treats from Petra. Veltash called for order. It took 3 attempts. Even if we accept the legal argument, there's a practical concern. You've excavated an unauthorized complex beneath station infrastructure. You've accessed restricted materials. You've created a security risk. Krival stood. I've completed the structural analysis. The complex is sound. Better than sound, actually. The engineering is flawless. Load-bearing supports are properly distributed. Ventilation exceeds safety standards. Emergency exits are clearly marked. She hesitated. It's better designed than some of our official facilities. They're cubs, Veltash said. How is that possible? We consulted station engineering databases, Korth explained. We reviewed structural specifications. We applied standard construction protocols. The information was publicly available. You taught yourselves engineering? We taught ourselves what we needed to know. The human demonstrated that learning is most effective when motivated by practical application. I watched Petra's expression. She looked confused, like she couldn't understand why everyone was making this complicated. It's just problem solving, she said. You give smart creatures a challenge, they figure it out. I've seen dogs learn to open complex locks because there was food on the other side. These guys are way smarter than dogs. Thank you for that assessment, Veltash said dryly. One of the xenopsychologists, a Hurlan named Dexith, cleared his throat. I'd like to examine the underground complex myself. If these cubs have genuinely created a functional civic organization, we need to understand the methodology. I'll take you down, I offered. The tour group ended up including 12 officials. We descended in shifts because the tunnels couldn't accommodate everyone simultaneously. The cubs had prepared for this. They'd posted guides at key junctions. Scylla led the main group while younger cubs managed traffic flow. Dexith examined everything: the library, the meeting chamber, the administrative offices. Yes, they had administrative offices. He read documents, observed the organizational systems, studied the hierarchical structures. In the main chamber, he stopped at the Constitution carved into the wall. This is sophisticated political philosophy, he said quietly. The balance between individual rights and collective responsibility, the checks on authority, the democratic processes. He turned to Rax. Where did you learn this? Rax led him to a specific section of the library. He pulled out documents showing observation notes on adult behavior, analysis of station management systems, and comparative studies of different organizational approaches. You studied us, Dexith whispered. We observed authority structures across species, identified effective patterns, eliminated ineffective ones, synthesized optimal model for our population. Rax paused. The human taught us that observation and adaptation are primary survival skills. I taught them to watch my hand signals, Petra said from the tunnel entrance. They generalized it into anthropological research. That's not generalization, Mothrin said. That's cognitive leap. That's abstract reasoning at adult level. Or it's just smart cubs who got bored and found something interesting to do. Petra gave Rax a treat. Good explanation, buddy. We returned to the conference chamber. The officials were unsettled. I could see it in their body language, their color shifts, their positioning. They'd gone down expecting to find cubs playing at government. They'd found cubs actually governing. Veltash reconvened the hearing. I've reviewed the evidence. Legal precedent is unclear, but leaning toward the cub's interpretation. The structural integrity is sound. The organizational system is functional. She looked at Rax. But there remains a fundamental question. Why? Why build a government? Why seek recognition? What are you hoping to achieve? Rax stood. All three cubs stood, actually, forming a unified front. We are treated as children. We are supervised constantly. We have no autonomy, no voice in decisions affecting our lives, no representation in station governance. Rax's voice came through the translator with unexpected force. The human demonstrated that hierarchical structure requires mutual respect. She gives commands. We obey. But she also listens. She observes. She adapts to our needs. We want the same relationship with station authority, Scylla continued. Recognition as organized entity grants us formal voice, allows us to participate in governance rather than simply being governed. We are not requesting independence, Korth added. We are requesting partnership. The room was silent. You want representation, Tolovec said slowly. You've built a government to prove you're capable of civic participation, so that station authority will include you in decision-making processes. Yes. That's remarkably mature reasoning. The human taught us that respect is earned through demonstrated capability. We have demonstrated capability. Petra looked uncomfortable. I just taught them to sit when I whistle. You taught them that clear communication and consistent behavior earn trust, Rax said. We applied the principle to larger social context. Dexith was making rapid notes. This is revolutionary. If cubs can achieve this level of civic sophistication through proper environmental enrichment and structured social interaction, we may need to completely revise our approach to youth development across multiple species. One thing at a time, Veltash said. The immediate question is whether to recognize this organization officially. Station law supports their position, Kristanal said. I've reviewed every relevant protocol. They meet the technical requirements. But the precedent, someone argued. If we recognize one group of cubs as legitimate civic entity, every young population in the sector will demand the same. Good, Rax said simply. They should. More chaos, more arguing, more officials trying to find legal reasons to deny the petition. Veltash finally raised all 6 hands for silence. This requires review by the Galactic Childcare Standards Board. This is beyond station authority. When will they arrive? I asked. They're already en route. Should dock within 3 cycles. The cubs chuffed in unison. Rax looked directly at me. We will prepare formal presentation, he said through the translator. Of course you will, I muttered. The hearing adjourned. Officials filed out, still arguing. Petra distributed treats to the cubs like she'd just finished a normal training session. You did good, she told them. Very good sit and stay during the boring parts. The cubs had just argued complex political philosophy with senior station officials. Petra was praising them for not fidgeting. Somehow, That felt exactly right. The Galactic Childcare Standards Board arrived with enough documentation to fill a cargo bay. 3 representatives from different species, each one carrying the weight of sector-wide youth development policy. They requested immediate access to the Cubs and their underground complex. I met them at the docking port. Lead representative was a Thavan named Quinara, whose species was known for obsessive attention to detail and an inability to tolerate inefficiency. She did not look pleased to be here. "This is highly irregular," she said by way of greeting. "Cubs do not form governments. Cubs do not petition for civic recognition. Cubs certainly do not build underground legislative complexes." "And yet," I said, because apparently that was my catchphrase now. The other 2 representatives were Mortek, a Vorine legal specialist, and Thress, a Herlan developmental psychologist. They'd all reviewed the preliminary reports during transit. None of them believed the reports were accurate. "Take us to the Cubs," Quinara demanded. I led them to the main play area. The Cubs were engaged in what Petra called morning session. She had them running through an obstacle course while responding to voice commands and hand signals. "Rax, drop!" Petra called. Rax immediately flattened himself to the ground. "Scylla, recall!" Scylla abandoned the climbing structure and sprinted to Petra's side, sliding to a perfect sit. "All Cubs, formation!" Every Cub in the room moved into a precise semicircle. 42 predators arranging themselves like they'd been doing drill exercises their entire lives. Quinara's cranial spines flared. "That's not normal Cub behavior." "It's pack behavior," Petra said cheerfully. "Release!" The Cubs scattered back to play. "This is Petra. She's the human," I said to the board representatives. "The animal trainer," Mortek said, examining his datapad. "Dog trainer, specifically," Petra corrected, "though I've worked with other species." "You applied animal training techniques to sentient beings," Thress said carefully. "I applied behavioral science to intelligent pack predators. Same principles work across the board." She whistled sharply. "Rax, come introduce yourself." Rax trotted over and sat in front of the board representatives. He chuffed politely. "He's greeting you," Petra explained. "We would like to see the underground complex," Quinara said, ignoring Rax completely. Rax's ears flattened. He was offended. "The Cubs have prepared a formal presentation," I said quickly. "They're expecting you in the main chamber at midday." "We don't need a presentation. We need an inspection." "With respect," Tolovec said, appearing from the corridor, "you're here to evaluate their petition for civic recognition. That requires hearing their case." Quinara's spines flared again, but she nodded. "Fine. Midday." The Cubs had transformed the main chamber. They'd installed better lighting. They'd arranged seating for the board representatives. They'd prepared visual aids consisting of carved diagrams mounted on the walls. Rax stood at the central platform with Scylla and Korth flanking him. The other 35 Cubs sat in precise rows behind them. Quinara took her seat with obvious skepticism. "Proceed," Rax began. The translation matrix rendered his chuffs into clear, formal language. "Thank you for attending. We are the Organized Youth Assembly of Dormitory Section C. We have petitioned for recognition as legitimate civic entity under station law. Our presentation will demonstrate our organizational capacity, civic responsibility, and commitment to cooperative governance." He gestured to Scylla, who stepped forward with documentation. "Our assembly formed 28 days ago following the arrival of human specialist Petra. She implemented hierarchical pack structure to reduce conflict. We observed effectiveness of clear authority chains immediate feedback systems, and reward-based behavioral reinforcement. Korth took over. We analyzed the methodology. We identified underlying principles applicable to self-governance. We implemented democratic processes based on pack hierarchy model. Results include 96% reduction in violent incidents, complete elimination of property damage, and 100% participation in civic processes. The board representatives were taking notes. Furious notes. Rax continued with specific examples. He described their legislative process, showing how they developed rules through group discussion and voting. He explained their conflict resolution system. He detailed their resource management, proving they could maintain infrastructure independently. We are not requesting independence, Rax emphasized. We are requesting partnership. We recognize adult authority. We recognize need for supervision. But we also recognize our capability for meaningful civic participation. Scylla presented comparative data, cubs in other dormitory sections versus cubs in Section C. The differences were striking. Section C showed higher cooperation rates, better emotional regulation, improved learning outcomes. The human's methodology works, Scylla said. Not because we are like dogs, because we are intelligent social beings who respond to clear structure and consistent reinforcement. Thress interrupted. You're arguing that treating you with the same behavioral training used for animals actually demonstrates respect. We are arguing that effective communication and clear expectations demonstrate respect, Korth corrected. The human adapted her methods to our needs. She observed our responses. She treated us as individuals within a pack structure, rather than uniform population to be managed. She gave you treats, Quinara said flatly. She provided immediate positive reinforcement for desired behaviors, Rax said. Motivational psychology applicable across sentient species. The consistency and timing are critical. Mortek was reviewing something on his pad. Your constitution. Where did you learn constitutional theory? Station database, public access. We reviewed governmental structures across 40 civilizations. We synthesized optimal model for our population. You taught yourselves political science. We taught ourselves what we needed to know. The human demonstrated that learning occurs most effectively through practical application. The presentation continued for another hour. The cubs demonstrated their voting procedures. They showed their conflict resolution in action. They explained their future plans for expanding participation to other dormitory sections. When they finished, Quinara sat in silence for a long moment. This is the most sophisticated youth organization I've encountered in 30 years of fieldwork, she finally said. It shouldn't be possible. And yet, I said quietly. Petra raised her hand. Can I say something? Please. It's not animal training. It's behavioral science. These cubs are smart. Same principles apply because intelligence is intelligence. You give smart creatures structure, challenges, and respect. They rise to meet expectations. I expected them to behave like a functional pack. So they did. Then they took it further because they're way more capable than I gave them credit for. You're saying you underestimated them, Thress said. I'm saying everybody underestimates them. You call them children. You treat them like they need constant supervision. But they're predators with cognitive capacity comparable to adults. They just needed someone to give them tools and trust them to use those tools responsibly. Petra looked at Rax. They exceeded every expectation. Quinara stood. The board will deliberate. We'll provide our decision within 2 cycles. The cubs chuffed in unison. 2 cycles later, The board issued their ruling. The Organized Youth Assembly of Dormitory Section C was officially recognized as a legitimate civic entity. The board recommended their model be studied for potential implementation across multiple species and facilities. Petra's training methodology was designated for formal academic review. Multiple stations requested her consultation. She was confused why everyone was making such a big deal about basic dog training. The Cubs expanded their assembly to include participants from other dormitory sections. Within a month, they had representatives from 15 different species. The underground complex became an official civic space with proper safety protocols. Station protocols were revised. Youth representation was added to administrative committees. Cubs gained formal voice in decisions affecting their care and education. I watched it all unfold with something between pride and existential crisis. My entire career had been based on childcare theories that a human dog trainer had inadvertently revolutionized in less than 30 days. On the morning the new protocols went into effect, I found Petra in the play area doing morning session. Same routine she'd been doing since day one. Whistle commands, hand signals, treats for good behavior. "You changed everything," I told her. She looked up, genuinely puzzled. "I just taught them to sit." "You taught them they were capable of more than we thought possible." "Well, yeah. They're smart. Anyone could see that." She threw a treat to Rax, who caught it perfectly. "Good leadership, buddy." Rax chuffed happily and returned to supervising the younger cub's obstacle course training. The cub who'd built a government under the floor was making sure everyone got their exercise time. Petra gave me a treat bag. "Here, you should work with them more directly. They respect you, but they need to see you as part of the pack." I took the bag. Inside were standard protein treats, exactly the kind I'd spent 8 cycles trying to replace with nutritionally optimized alternatives. "How do I start?" I asked. "Call Rax over. Tell him to sit. When he does, give him a treat and say good boy. It's that simple." It wasn't simple. Nothing about this was simple. But I whistled. Rax came. I told him to sit. He sat. I gave him a treat. "Good boy." His tail wagged. Somewhere beneath us, 38 cubs were probably conducting legislative business. But up here, in the morning light, we were just a pack working on the basics. Petra smiled. "See? You're a natural." I wasn't. But maybe that was the point. The cubs didn't need natural talent. They needed someone to believe they could do more. The human had believed, and they'd built a civilization in response.